Hello, everyone. I hope you're ready for this today. Yeah, that is a bad pun on the title, isn't it? Thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you. I do appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe things, notifications, all those things just to make it easier for people to find us just like you did. And before I get too far, yeah, I'm sort of cracking myself up here today. I want to remind you the books are available at authorjerrymitchell.com, or you can go to giveguide90.com and follow the links from there. And we're back over here. Okay. Something I've talked about before, and after a couple of conversations that I've had over the last couple of weeks, I realized I need to talk about this, and it needs to be addressed more often than it is. And it's not something earth shattering, right? It's just important. You know, a lot of people don't think that they know enough about the Bible to tell someone their reason for why they believe the words of the Creator. They're like, oh, I don't want to speak to that person because what if they ask me a question? What if I don't know the answer? You know, what I find in speaking to these folks is they are far more able to offer insight. They're more able to offer information than a lot of the members of the clergy, whether they're pastors, priests, rabbis, it doesn't matter. A lot of times, you know, these folks, they had questions they asked. But for some reason, I'm sorry, Susie's barking. For some reason, they think, you know, I haven't graduated from Bible college. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to approach people. Well, being humble enough to admit that you don't know everything, you don't have all the answers, that actually can be, for a lot of people, the reason that causes them to study. It's that simple. You know, they have questions, they want to know, right? So they go study. But on the other side, being arrogant enough to think, I've gone to school, I know all these things, and it gets you complacent and lazy, and you don't study. A friend of mine the other day had a conversation with a member of the clergy. This person admitted, you know, when I was in school, when I was going through my training, they didn't teach us a lot of Bible. It was all about administrating and how to run an organization. You see, our modern colleges, our seminaries, and other places of training, they're training leaders to administrate, but they're not teaching Bible. Don't know why. It's a shame, really. People want to be able to trust their priest. They want to be able to trust their rabbi. They want to be able to trust their pastor. They want to know when they go to them, they're going to get honest, sound, biblical answers to their problems and their questions. And what I hear so often is that's just not happening. The other side of that coin, there's a lot of people who actually do study, who search out the answers. You know, they have questions. They want to know. This might be why you found where you're at, right? You probably came, what's this Give God Money thing? I got questions about this. And hopefully you stay because I'm giving you sound, honest information. You know, a lot of people, they think they're not qualified. They don't have a degree. They don't speak up. And those are the folks who usually know way more than the people who do speak up. Let's look at some fairly well-known people in the Bible. See if they were qualified to speak, right? We look at Amos 7:14. You've got to go all the way down near the end of Amos before you realize I was not a prophet. I was not a prophet, Amos replied, nor was I the son of a prophet. I was a herdsman and a tender of sycamore figs. He was a farmer. With 9 chapters in the Bible, he didn't claim to be a prophet. He said, I'm a farmer. But Amos had something the priests didn't have, some of the other people didn't have. He had a willingness to go where he was sent, to deliver the message that he was to deliver to the people that he was sent to deliver the message to. I think I just said that about 6 different times, 3 different ways. Anyway, he didn't have any formal Bible education. He didn't have a PhD. He was simply willing to hear and obey. You know the old song, right? Hear and trust and obey. Hear and obey. You could say it either way. In Matthew, and here's where I'm going to get in trouble with some folks. I already know I can hear it coming. But that's all right. Matthew 4:18. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting nets into the sea, for they were fishermen. They didn't have a degree. Not all the disciples were fishermen either, right? None of them had been to Bible college. None of them had been to seminary. None of them had been to rabbinic school. They weren't priests. They weren't trained. Now, I'll admit, after a year with Yeshua, after a year with Jesus, they got an education. But even after that year was over, they still made some kind of foolish mistakes. But when push came to shove, they gave the message and they delivered it in a big way. Here's an interesting dilemma, though. Hosea. Now, if you're not familiar with Hosea, do yourself a favor. Go read it. Hosea 1:2. When the Lord first spoke in Hosea, he told him, "Go, take a prostitute as your wife and have children of adultery, because this land is flagrantly prostituting itself by departing from the Lord." Now, we don't know a whole lot about Hosea, and it's probably a good thing we don't know a lot about him, right? You know, he wasn't the son of someone important, apparently. He wasn't really that well known throughout the land until later. But because he was just kind of average, you know, if he had been important, would what happened to him actually resonate with most of us? Probably not. He was a commoner. He was just somebody from a village. And he said, go marry a prostitute. Go marry this person who's going to be unfaithful. Go raise somebody else's kids thinking they're your own. Disconcerting, to say the least, right? I might have a little problem. You know, if I heard God say, you need to go marry a prostitute, I'm not sure. You know, I'd have to think about that for a while. That would give me cause to pause, right? You're doing something that the culture of the time had determined to be embarrassing and tactless, and doing it on purpose. It led him into some trouble, didn't it? But still, he was able to deliver the message he was given. And if he hadn't have lived through that and used his life as the example, would he have been able to give the message of unfaithfulness? Would he have been able to give the message of restoration? Probably not. So that brings up the question that you knew was coming. You knew this was coming, right? If our Creator spoke to you and you're hearing it, you're like, really? Are you sure? Lord, are you sure that's what you want me to do? And you find out it really is him saying, go do this. But it's embarrassing. What if I'm not, what if I screw up? What if I mess up? What if I fail? Lord, what if I fail? Would you be willing to obey anyway? I know a lot of people, and I've heard people say this more times than I can count. Oh, if I were alive at the time of Jesus and he come by and said, just follow me, I'd go. I'd drop everything and go. It would be so wonderful. And I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure you would. Some people that I've heard this from, they're a lot more symbolism over substance. Let's just put it that way. And like I said, I've met a lot of people who think, well, I don't know enough. I don't know enough to go say something. I don't know how to say this to somebody. Whatever. They don't want to speak to one person. They're not willing to lead a Bible study because they think they're not ready. Some people, and this is mainly a problem with the Christian church. They have been told that you need to convince others to convert. Nowhere in the Bible does it say to convert anybody. I've heard sermons about how Jeremiah preached for 40 years and never had anyone convert. I've heard sermons preached on how making disciples means bringing people into the church. And what they're really talking about is a membership drive, right? The job of a prophet or an apostle is not to convert anyone. Oh, you just spoke heresy. Oh, you just spoke heresy. No, I didn't. Look it up. The job of a prophet, the job of an apostle is to go to the people that you are sent to and deliver the message you are given. That's it. When the people hear the message, they can either believe it or they can reject it. It's up to them at that point. But if you speak the words you are given, that's your job. If your job is to be another Jeremiah, well, you delivered the message. You were willing. You were obedient. But, if you hear the message and you know it's coming from the Almighty, you know it's coming from the Creator, and you don't go, then it's on you. It's on you. It's not on the other person. It's on you. And just because you might not have a degree doesn't mean that your words aren't important. It doesn't mean that your words don't carry weight. Psalm 113, verses 7 and 8. He raises the poor from the dust and he lifts the needy from the dump to seat them with nobles, with princes of his people. And this verse has been confused often. You see, our Creator offers us his words if we're willing to hear them. And he sends us when we're willing to speak. He reveals things to the people who are willing to see them. And more often than not, he uses those same people to show those things to the people who are blind to his ways and his glory. He doesn't often use important people. He doesn't often use royalty. He doesn't often use and I shouldn't say it this way. He doesn't often use the people we think we should be looking up to. More times than not, he uses the person next door, down the street. He uses the ones who we think of as, who are you? You're just like me. You're just average. That's who he chooses to use. But I'm going to caution you. Okay, I'm going to caution you. If you think he's given you words, make sure they're from the Creator. It's okay to ask for verification. Gideon did, right, with the fleece. You don't have to be that dramatic. Chances are you can't be. But Just like I need to know this comes from you, because if I think it's coming from me, I'm going to get it wrong, right? It's got to come from you, because if it's coming from me, it ain't going to work. It just ain't going to work. Just being serious here. It ain't going to work. It's got to come from the Almighty. But once you have that verification, be willing to go, be willing to speak. Do you know you're probably more ready than you think you are? Especially if at the beginning of this, you were one of those people who thought, I'm not ready. Chances are you're more ready than you know. Something to think about until next time. And until then, I do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.